Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. So, Nellie, Swillen, and Robert and I, we attended a conference at Southern Polytechnic State University titled Globalizing the Future, Incorporating Energy Across the Curriculum. And it was a one-day event. It had about 4 sessions. I'm going to talk about the second session in the conference presentation. It was given by 2 University of Pittsburgh environmental studies and international studies scholars, Mark Collins and Alison Delmore. So Mark Collins talked about using reality-based scenarios for group projects, combining sciences, social sciences and international studies. That was the title of his presentation. He began by setting up the context for his presentation, giving us some perspective for why reality-based scenarios are useful. So he had this slide of an Association of American Colleges and Universities survey, which he took from Rutgers University's webpage, one of the web pages. What skills and qualities have more value when hiring a college graduate? This is the employer perspective, and 76% said ethical judgment and integrity is very important. 63% said that being comfortable working with colleagues and people from clients from diverse cultures is very important. And both of these categories drew wide responses, as you might see, 96% responses. And so his reality-based scenario ties with some of these issues, ethical-based judgment and integrity, and being able to interact with people from diverse backgrounds and fields. This was another slide that he showed. What's important for recent college graduate who wants a long-term career in an organization. Again, an employer perspective. Again, the same survey. 55% said that recent graduates should have both a field-specific knowledge and a wide-ranging knowledge of different areas. And again, this, I think, ties to his reality-based scenarios. Then he showed us a few maps, which were interesting to give us a perspective of how our students might view things and should view things if they have a more comprehensive view. So this is a world map taken from worldmapper.org website. This shows the land area and all the continents in terms of land area. But the same world map looks different when we look at the category of population. And here you have this bloated section, India and China, with huge populations. This section suddenly becomes very large as compared to the other parts of the world. So if one looks at population, then one thinks differently about the world. This is another map, this time showing ecological footprint, which is measured in terms of fuel consumption, food consumption, and some other parameters. And again, you will see that here, the North American continent is huge, bloated, and so are India and China. And we keep hearing about America, India, and China as these ecologically important countries in the world. So this is just to give us some perspective of why reality-based scenarios might be useful for our students. Coming to the scenarios themselves, I have a handout here that gives a good example scenario. It's a detailed scenario, and I thought that this handout will be useful to all of us. So I'll just pass it around so that everybody can take one. The conference organizers were kind enough to put up these files on an internet space, and we were able to download things from there. And this is a typical reality-based scenario. It discusses a case about Mexico related to tortillas and how genetically modified tortillas became an issue for a fictitious company. So Mark told us that when creating a scenario, one can take a simple, yeah, please come in. One can take a simple step such as Googling a country and a subject. So for example, Google Bhutan and environmental concerns. Look for local angle, look for a local controversy, look for good intentions that went back. And he specified, in fact, many of the words on these slides are his own words. I have taken his own words. I have not changed them. Some words I have changed, but some words I have used his own. And so he specifically mentioned that scenarios that look at good versus evil, developed countries versus developing countries, us versus them do not turn out so well. If possible, pick a topic outside your area of expertise. So this was another suggestion that he gave in relation to reality-based scenarios. And in terms of how this kind of scenario would work out in a class, a scenario would be given to a group of 4 to 6 students. There will be several scenarios in each class. The scenario deliverables will be a presentation with a written report in about a month, and groups will work independently on their research and on their strategy. There will be a midpoint memo, a sort of a progress report, and a meeting with the instructor. And the presentation will be 15 to 25 minutes with a written binder containing a report and other documents that a group researched, plus bibliography. So this is how the whole scenario will unfold while teaching in class. And he specifically said that he doesn't allow presenters to go over their time limit more than 5 minutes. This is a good quote that he had on one of his slides, and I'm going to read this out. Look for competing interests by well-intentioned stakeholders, where students need to engage in an objective, fact-based research to provide the intended audience with background, solutions, and one recommendation, a single justifiable recommendation. Not too many, but just one. So that was Mark. Alison Delnor, who is a director of a European Union Studies Center at University of Pittsburgh, she presented a concept called RTTP, which means reacting to the past. So scenarios based on past events. And there is a science edition of this methodology or this method, also suitable for soft sciences. Reacting to the past is about role playing or playing games in a class based on historical events and cases and historical persons. It was pioneered in the late 1990s by a Barnard College historian, Mark Carnes. And students, they are assigned roles. For example, one student might be Vladimir Putin, one student might be Angela Merkel, but they have to act out their own script. Even though they are assigned roles, they need to act out their own script. They need to interpret the role for the audience. There are some science games reacting to the past, book-length games such as Acid Rain in Europe, Evolution versus Creationism controversy in Kansas in the 90s, the trial of Galileo. There are some chapter-length games that last about a week in a semester. Book-length games last a few weeks. And I have a few handouts here about reacting to the past that I'm going to pass out. This handout has some extra information that you can find out on the internet. This has links that you can go to and find out more about reacting to the past, what it means. This handout is a brief description of this method, reacting to the past. And this handout contains two published reacting to the past cases. It contains their abstracts. That is all I have. Thank you very much.
Pardon my casual dress, we are barbecuing 225 slabs of ribs for Enactus today. I'm a little smoky, but we're having a good turnout. The kids are working hard and they've made some money, so we're excited about that. Enactus, formerly known as SITE. I know a lot of people are familiar with the organization SITE. The presentation that I am summarizing, the gentleman had a last minute misfortune, was not able to attend. So I've tried to decipher his slides, and so I did not get the benefit of hearing him present. But frankly, that was the main presentation that I wanted to hear. The topic was the sort of the environmental implications of economic growth and resultant energy use in China. And of course, we can all imagine some of the statistics that are coming out. What I thought I would do, it's a very statistical, sort of a fact basis. It's more of an alarming presentation, an eye-opening presentation than anything else. What I thought I'd do is just kind of hit the highlights of the presentation. Of course, China, to start with, has a population of roughly 4 times ours. Of course, India is more than double ours, but when you just start looking at the population level there's a reason for concern when it comes to energy consumption. A lot of people have blamed the increases in the prices in energy and things, increases in a lot of commodities like steel and other metals and materials to the awakening of the sleeping giant of China. Of course, China until about 1980, 1985 was largely agricultural, and the big increase in China and consumption in China has resulted from a move from a largely agricultural economy to an urban-based manufacturing economy based on mass manufacturing of consumer products. All you have to do is go to Walmart to see the large quantities of goods that are imported here from China. The numbers are staggering if you look at the growth of China. The average annual growth rate from 1978 to 1993 was 10%. The average, and when I say average, the growth rate of the economy, GDP growth. It's interesting to me, the United States is technically in a recession if we have two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. So if we're at negative 0.5% GDP growth one quarter and then the next quarter we're at negative 0.2, then technically we're in a recession. For the last 5 years, the United States has averaged anywhere from 1.5% to 2% economic growth over the last 5 or 6 years, which to us feels like a recession. In China, the equivalent figure would be somewhere around 7%. If they don't have 7% economic growth because of the population, because of the fast growth that they've had so far, it feels like a recession to them. They've been averaging the last couple of years about 6.5% or 7%, which for them is very slow. But for the better part of, 20 years, they were averaging 10% GDP growth a year, which is incredible. I mean, it's just an unbelievable amount. And it's amazing that they have not had more inflation than they have had. They've had quite a bit of inflation, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But some of the things that were interesting to me, the average annual per capita increase in income, this is an annual increase of income from 1980 to 2006, was 8.5%. It'd be nice to have that kind of a raise in income every year, but that's, 26 years of 8.5% income. Now let's put those figures in perspective. In 1986, the average Chinese made the equivalent of 228 US dollars per year. In 2010, the average Chinese made about 4,500 US dollars per person per year. Just a few statistics here, and I don't want to belabor the statistics. It doesn't take too long to realize what the implications are, but 2010 growth rate in GDP was 10.3%. Their inflation rate is 3.3%. Their consumer price index is 3.3%, which is slightly elevated, but considering the level of growth that they've had, that's not terrible. I think we have probably suffered more from fuel price increases and other energy price increases here just because of the shortage. Typically, over the years, the U.S. has been by far the largest consumer of fuel, and now, of course, fuel and commodities. And now, of course, we have a rival with China. Of course, China's a lot larger. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Retail sales in 2010 up 18.4%. That's an incredible amount there. Industrial value added 15.7%. Total foreign trade in 2010 alone was up 34.7%. So those are just some incredible numbers. And the list goes on. I just want to share a few of those. But the strategy, as I mentioned earlier, labor-intensive, low-cost, labor-intensive, but based on large factories in cities. There's been a tremendous movement to cities. And just to summarize, the incomes are going up, the disposable income is going up, but the consumption of energy we're going to see as being the biggest implication. In 1978, China's GDP totaled 150 billion US dollars. That was ranked 11th in the world. Today, all right, so we went from 150 billion to 5.85 trillion from 1978 to 2010. Now China is the second largest economy in the world. which is an incredible move. Okay, so you know where this is going. This is just an awakening giant, and the consumption of electricity and other fuels has skyrocketed at the same level. And then, of course, the ultimate implication for purposes of pointing out to students is the potential ecological concerns and the impact on the environment. And that's what we're seeing. In 1979, 245 million Chinese did not have access to electricity. And that's, at that time, roughly the same population as the United States. As of 2002, less than 20 million Chinese, which is less than 2% of the population, did not have access to electricity. The problem with China's electricity production as it stands now, to their credit, they are working to change this, but the problem is that nearly 70% of their electricity production is from coal. So it's a tremendous amount of CO2 emission. They're very dependent on coal. Their demand for energy has doubled since 2004, and almost all of that growth has been fueled with the burning of coal. And so you can imagine what the ecological impact is there. We'll mention that in just a minute. Electricity consumption, even though we're down to 20 million without power in China, they're still expecting electricity consumption in China to continue to increase by 5% per annum. So a continuation of 5% per year increase. To China's credit, they have tried to move away from coal. And let me just give you some quick statistics on growth by energy sector. First of all, this is alarming to me. As much as China has grown, and again, they're really in bad shape if they don't get 7% GDP growth, but it's been estimated that environmental pollution costs China about 2% per year in GDP growth. Now, I'm not sure what those costs are made up of, but imagine the GDP growth that they could experience without some of the costs if they could do a better job of controlling their pollution. Natural gas and liquefied natural gas is a tremendous area of growth. I've got some statistics here. It's projected that by 2020, my eyes are not right here, 2010 level was, from 2010 to 2020, 2010 to 2020, natural gas usage will double. Of course, liquefied natural gas will be cleaner than coal. China's output of crude oil has plateaued, but their usage of imported oil is 44% of all oil needs that they have are fulfilled through import. So they're importing 44% of the oil that they need. And it's looking like with their production plateauing and they are not able to raise their production, it looks like that they're going to have to start importing as much as 60% of their oil consumption. So long-term price of gasoline here in the United States, I wouldn't look for it to get much below that $3 per gallon, just a guess there. Nuclear power, certainly a charged topic, but China plans to quadruple their usage of nuclear power over the next 10 years. Their hydro and wind power, they plan to double that. Of course, that's a small amount compared to coal. And again, to their credit, they're working on renewable and clean energy. They're planning to triple their wind power, and they're planning to triple solar power, and to triple from 2010 to 2020. And then biomass, they are leading the way with biomass. They plan to increase that by 6 times between 2010 and 2020. So They are an offender in many ways in terms of just the mass that they're using, the amount of energy consumption that they're using, and the tremendous growth that they have. But to their credit, they're working on cleaner energy sources. It appears that they're working at it very hard. Okay, just a few quick statistics. It would have been good to, this gentleman, Louis Schwartz from the University of Pittsburgh, that presented the paper, understand he speaks Chinese and has spent a lot of time in China. I was working with my son last night on a test about Marco Polo, and I was thinking about Louis Schwartz, kind of like Marco Polo over there observing the Chinese. It would have been interesting to hear some of his stories and perspective that he could have given. But some of the numbers on the environment, and I'll close my comments here, are alarming. The problem of air pollution has reached catastrophic proportions in China. And I'm not a science person here, but parts per million of 2.5 at 300 is equivalent to smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. In January 2013, there were 15 days where there were parts per million, 2.5 was at or above 300. Some of you scientists, I don't know if that makes sense, but apparently the air quality was roughly equivalent to cigarette smoke for 15 days out of January in 2013. Lung cancer deaths have increased over 400% in China over the last 30 years. China now is the world's largest emitter of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide emissions from China now account for 28% of the global total. Carbon dioxide emissions in China grew by 3.8% in 2012, and we're not expecting their emissions to peak until 2030, despite some of the incentives, the initiatives that they've had to increase clean energy. Okay, some of the other problems that we're seeing, a lot of organic matter in the water. China, first of all, has a shortage of water. I believe I saw the statistic that China uses about 28%. China has 28% of the or 22% of the world's population, but only 7% of the fresh water available in the world, and they are consuming more water too. But one of the problems they're having in some of the rivers and lakes is organic algae bloom. They're having a tremendous amount of algae taking over some of their waterways. They had a tremendous benzene spill in 2005 that had a large fish kill. Water is a major problem there. More than 70% of the rivers and lakes in China have, quote, significant pollution. More than 50% of urban groundwater is contaminated to some degree. Water pollution is aggravated by persistent water pollution accidents that are happening. And also, it was estimated that about 10% of the rice supply has significant levels of cadmium that have seeped in through the water. Also alarming is the desertification, say that 3 times fast, in China. About 27% of China is now suffering desertification, which is 1 million square miles of space. So that's a potential issue there too. Okay, some other problems, some food safety issues that they've run into. There's a handful of villages throughout China, very small villages that are referred to as cancer villages, where there's large numbers of cancer, large incidences of cancer. I was going to see if there were a few more. But I think that's the biggest statistic I saw, is that they're up to 2.5% to 3% of their GDP in pollution cost, which I think we can see that. Don't know that there are any solutions. It seems that China is trying to take the initiative with clean power, but I think from the purposes of informing your students, I talk a lot about China in my international business class, and after I got these notes, I walked away with a number of statistics that, I think the big thing is the level of GDP growth leading to the level of consumption, and then of course the problems with environmental pollution. But China is I guess one good point from an economic standpoint is that China is moving back from strictly manufacturing, moving more down to some of the professional areas. We talk in the international business class about how we utilize Chinese engineers, Chinese doctors, Chinese architects. And so I think we will see more movement to professional and services away from just strictly manufacturing. It was interesting. I wish the professor had been there to present it, but I enjoyed looking at the notes, and I'd be glad to provide a link to all of his statistics. Statistics are staggering to look at. So thank y'all very much.
Hello, everyone. Merely question my senior by age status initially, and we had a little scuffle there. Who's the presenter? I'm kidding. I want to just make a few general remarks. I'm not going to summarize what I learned during this conference. Just want to tell you some personal impressions that I had initially regarding this event and in a somewhat larger context. When I first got the email from Elizabeth Gurnak regarding who would like to attend, I thought to myself, why not? The topic was energy in the context of international relations, and I said to myself, well, two things. I've done some work as a graduate student on novel power sources, batteries, fuel cells, and I'm also, in some sense, international, so it's probably a perfect venue for me to go and check out what the latest academic prose regarding this is. And I have to tell you, I had some certain misgivings because there wasn't enough information listed or published on what precisely was going to be presented. I somehow suspected that this might be related to there's certain, I don't know if you're aware, there's certain front organizations for the petroleum industry that have tied closely with academia. And let's face it, we all live in the real world. Funding is produced in large part by private companies. So there's a kind of I wouldn't say overt, but probably as a side effect, there's a way to influence academic discussion away from objectivity in some sense. To my somewhat surprise, these fears were not justified. The presentation I was supposed to talk about initially on crude oil and gas extraction was given by a geologist from the University of Pittsburgh who has done work with private companies and corporations, but in no way did that seem biased, although I have to tell you at the end, when the sources were listed, a lot of it had to do with British Petroleum statistics, and there was some also National Geological Survey data as well. I'm not in a position to comment about the objectivity. My impression was this, that the whole conference was intended on being a forum where ideas about how to engage students in critical thinking, number one. And second, in critical thinking as applied to the fact that we live in a world that in many ways borders are transcended. This is not the world in which certainly people of my generation grew up, where borders were very significant in determining things like worldview, things like loyalty, things like economic pursuit. Right? Today's world is vastly different. So exposing students to these concepts. I have to tell you, our university, maybe this sounds a little biased on my part, but I think it's fairly fortunate. I mean, look at who's presenting. I believe 3 out of 4 were born outside the country. We have We have instructors, faculty, and possibly staff. Certainly I knew at least one example that can deliver at least a bilateral point of view on many significant topics. Hopefully, more than that, international awareness of global interconnectedness, awareness of how we are living in the same boat, going on, we're not sure where exactly, but there are certain trends that need to be discussed within academic objectivity. And while I was attending the conference, and later certainly, certain ideas came to mind that, I mean, I'm sure this was discussed as part of the QEP platform, whether we should require a specific course to be designated for exploration and for studying things that are related to worldwide events, facts, and many things come to mind. Energy, course on energy, from so many points of view. History, technology, policy, politics, right? Also, one can go, democracy, food, course on food. All these things are linked, of course. Energy is linked to food, is linked to labor, is linked to political unrest or stability. So it probably actually is a very good topic to kind of explore and maybe create a course or a seminar of our own, borrowing, of course, from best practices, not totally reinventing the wheel, but making it ours. That's why I hesitated. I don't want to just show someone else's presentation because there was a lot of valuable information. For me personally, I learned, even though I exist in large measure thanks to the goodness and charity of my geological colleagues, we rarely engage in discussions that are across the board. First of all, we don't have much time. So it took me driving a few hours from here to hear someone else's presentation to learn some interesting basic facts that I wasn't completely aware of. For instance, horizontal drilling, the technology that exploded and that changed the map of energy extraction, certainly in the United States. All those things were mentioned and discussed. What I did not see in the presentation on the geology of extraction of crude oil and natural gas was things like environmental consequences, right? There were some other presentations that were linked to this. If anybody interested, I can give you the website, and there's a password. You can just go and browse yourself. The last question I want to entertain is, how can these classes be given? These are typically topics outside the normal curriculum or the standard curriculum. I'm not confident that this can be done in one step, such as somebody undertaking it. I teach physics. Sam here teaches geology. Maybe he could, do it as an honors class or something like that. More appropriate, I think, would be the idea to sit down and think of a university-wide type of class which will engage students in critical thinking and global awareness under the heading of some particular topic. And some I already mentioned. And it's I've seen this. I've seen literature on this, and also it's been going around. It's not something that came up yesterday. But so that's all I have to say. I'll leave a few minutes for Nellie to tell you more about the literary side. Right. Thank you.
Actually, I will go through the slides that were shown to us, just because I don't think that it's very easy to summarize a lot of the data that you're going to see and a lot of the exercises that the students have to do, and I found it particularly interesting because you can take something very simple and relate it to something much bigger than what is around us. So that was the whole idea. This presentation was given also by Mark Collins, the same professor from University of Pittsburgh, but it's slightly different. The idea is how you can use household energy bills as proxy for discussing individual, local, and global sustainability. The idea of this project is to make students aware of the usage of different resources by taking hands-on activities and looking at simple household bills such as electricity, gas, water bills, to try to make a connection between what is directly happening in their life and what is the impact to the entire world. So it was interesting when Mark was talking about this project, is that as much as he was surprised how much students are not aware of their living environment, of what is happening in their household, as much as he was also surprised that some of the students knew exactly what is going on. I guess they were more aware of everything around them, and they were doing things to change the way they live. How everything started, I guess, it was, he didn't do this on its own. The idea was taken from a project that was done in the University of Michigan, and the immediate goals of this project was to develop awareness of personal consumption, learn units of consumption. Yeah, I'm a scientist and I teach science and units of not exactly consumption, but different scientific units, and it's really alarming how much students don't know about these units. Learn to convert quantities of consumption from one type of units to another. So it was really, this project was kind of close to me because as a scientist, and I thought it was very interesting. The idea was, those are just a few words about who can take this class, and I'm not really going through that, but the idea was to start with asking some particular general questions related to energy consumption in the form of how much do you pay for natural gas? How much do you pay for electricity, water? How much water or electricity or gas you consume? And students were not, as much as he told us, students were not really aware of what's going on. They could not even read their bills. They would pay, or their parents will pay, but they even didn't know what they're paying for. So if you don't know what you're paying for, would you know where it comes from? Would you know the impact of obtaining any sort of source of energy? Would you know where it comes from and what it takes to be produced? And obviously most of the students didn't know that. So Mark kind of wanted to try to make them aware of all that. What did he do? He showed them directly, I believe this is a water meter. He showed them directly electricity meter, gas meter, and most of them did not know what these strange things are in their house, especially what these numbers are. Are they in cubic feet, in liters, in gallons, in whatever it is? And he was really amazed. Yeah, it says gallons, but you have to multiply usually by 100 or 1,000 or 10 or what. They were not really aware of what is really going on with this measuring not utilities, devices. Also, he showed them bills. All this takes place in Pennsylvania, so the bills are gas bills from Pennsylvania. What all these numbers mean, where they come from, how you can calculate some of those numbers by yourself, what they're based on. And of course, we all know this is another, the electricity bill, and there was later on, I think, a water bill. So he asked some questions. How you can determine what are the numbers on these bills based on where do you live, how big is your house or apartment, how many people live there, how many floors, is it well isolated, insulated, etc., etc. And he even made the students calculate the living area. They should know what is considered as living area. Be able to do the math to calculate it, which is also important. And he continued with more analysis, asking what type of energy sources are used for heating or cooling. Again, what type of construction, etc., etc. So I'm showing you all this just to give you an idea of what you can use in a class to really make students be active and participate and do the work on their own. This is not rocket science. They can take this information, study, read about it, analyze, and make sense out of it. And I think that was the whole idea, just to be able to make sense out of it, and the critical thinking, just to be able to ask some questions about where the energy comes from and what it takes to come to us. More data that he required to be collected, so there is a lot of those surveys, and even more details here, how to convert energy, etc. This is the gas bill. So in his particular case, he concentrated a little more on natural gas as a source of energy. And the idea was to go a little deeper and try to ask more questions about where the natural gas comes from, how it comes to us, how it comes to the house, who produces it, etc., etc. So how we use the natural gas to heat our house. So he said his idea for the next time he teaches this or he uses this project is to even bring a furnace and show all the parts of the furnace and make sure students understand how it works, because most of them, he realized, they even don't know where the furnace is and what it does. So he showed a picture for now, but he would probably use a real one. So then some factors were considered whenever he was asking questions about, do we know where the energy comes from, what type of energy, and how it comes to us. He asked the students to consider some factors that are listed here: geography, time of the year, the temperature during the days, insulation, occupation, if the house is vacant most of the time or occupied by how many people, etc., etc. So students had to go back and research these questions and give a summary about them. And also in the case of natural gas, as I told you, he concentrated on natural gas. He tried to make them aware of how this source of energy is produced, where natural gas comes from, or fossil fuels, what is the history, how it comes to us. That was also another point I thought it was interesting that he made. I'm not aware either, what are the, pipelines and when they were built and are they effective and everything like that. So most probably the students are not very aware of it as well. The current pump pipelines. He showed them a map, of the Pennsylvania gas pipelines and where the gas comes from and where it goes. I thought it was interesting. And what he pointed out is you can use different types of modules. It doesn't need to be natural gas, electricity, energy. It could be anything we can think about and do the same kind of a project research and make the students to participate actively and understand what is really going on. He also, of course, is very important. He talked about implications, geography, why certain things happen in a certain way at different parts of US and the world. What is the access to water, because using electricity, using energy also is related to water, or you can make a whole project related about water, infrastructure, etc., etc. And he gave similar maps, which I kind of found interesting. I never thought about maps looking that way, but what is the rainfall in the world? And again, the parts that are inflated means there is more there, and that are smaller, thinner, that means that there is less rain there. This is just could be used for any type of statistics. Water usage, completely different. It's completely the opposite of the rainfall. And not to our surprise, we heard a few presentations already. I kind of talked about that. Fuel usage, you can see which parts of the world use the most fuel. Of course, we're right there on the top, and India, China, and the other countries, the other continents, completely different. Electricity production, who produces the most electricity, again, very clear from the table. Increase in electricity production, what you guys mentioned, we see large increase of electricity production over here. And again, you can connect these maps and data to many different studies. It just showed us examples. What are the implications of the physical place where you live? This was the main point, just to make students aware of what is surrounding them and what it takes for them just to live in a certain place. In America or in Asia, in Africa, elsewhere, what we eat, what we do, where do we get our supplies, etc. Because obviously many of the students are not really aware. It was interesting when he came to the point where he said, we all live up to certain expectations. We open the tap and we expect water to come out. Is it good water? Can we drink it? We think, if it comes from the sink, it's got to be good, right? But we don't really know. If we go and buy gasoline, if it says 89 octane, we believe it's 89 octane. Or, different types of infrastructure, we believe they're up to code. And we don't really question that. We don't go further to really question, is that really what it says it is? Garbage, where garbage goes, oh, we don't really care. Somebody picks it up and, they take care of it. But how we, and most of us and the students are not really aware of that. So I thought it's really interesting to see that. Again, and in the end, he talked about the implications of personal behavior, what kind of ecological footprint we leave, and nobody is forgiven for if they do something that would harm the environment, although it's different if we're talking about an individual person, a company, a whole country. We've heard about China. We know that one person can make a very little change, but it starts from there. Global consequences, again, he raised the questions of where we live, how others live, how we are connected to these other people, and what we can do to work together to change some of the ecological consequences from fuel production and fuel consumption, etc. So how he envisioned this project to end, of course, the students had to do all the work, collect the data, look at it, do the calculations, statistics, and the idea was that in the end they will write a summary of the personal energy consumption based on where the students live and based on all the surveys that I showed you, and hopefully in the end they can be able to judge their consumption in connection to other people's consumptions of energy or water or whatever we're talking about. Also be aware of what is the world consumption of these, what should I call it? Of energy or water, and probably change their way of living, and more specifically be a little more aware of what they can do to change the way they live, and also how they can be more involved in what is happening around them. So he was just saying that you can connect this to different types of disciplines or different types of subjects of research, and it was funny when he said I almost got through this entire presentation without mentioning environmental justice and climate change. Of course, this is all related to the changes that happen to the environment and what we can do to avoid disasters and the so much discussed climate changes. And again, you start with something very little, such as your energy consumption, looking at your bill, and maybe asking questions why I'm doing what I'm doing and why the world is doing what it's doing, so how we can change all that maybe little by little. Here are some of his sources, and I wanted to tell you, in the beginning I was kind of skeptical, how you're gonna make students interested to do all that, but I think in the process once you start and show them all the data and make them interested in looking at simple things such as bills, maybe because of these hands-on experience activities, they really will be more engaged, because we talk to them in class, we give them statistics, but they just go through their head. But if they actually have to look at the bills and do the math on their own and maybe realize how much they overpaid because they've done something wrong, I thought will probably make them think a little more and change things. So that is all I have, and I thought it's interesting and really stimulating if actually it's done in some of the classes. Thank you.
Are there any
Question, do we get to ask questions?
Sure.
So, it's my understanding that the intent of attending these conferences, especially this one, was to learn strategies for improving global awareness in general among students.
Yes.
Is it helpful? I mean, I know several of you teach classes that don't have an implicit global component to them.
It was helpful for me to see what other people have done and to give me ideas what probably I could do, like based not only on that presentation. That is what I can do in my science class or a lab class or a PChem lab, instead of really boring them with something that I know they're not very interested. We can do something more interesting like that.
Looks like it would fit some of them would fit pretty well in everyday chemistry.
Yes.
Environmental science class.
Environmental science, yeah.
Environmental science.
In
my environmental geology class.
Right.
Yeah.
And in my intro geology class.
Yeah, it can fit in a lot of science classes.
Yes, you actually don't need an environmental class. What I try to do, and I'm sure a lot of you are doing, even as we speak, is implicitly put information, or sometimes explicitly, within the context of some other narrative.
Yes.
When I talk about energy, I do hit on things such as energy production. Where does the energy come from? It's plugging into the wall. And what, can you show that map for the energy consumption, the bloated, go back. This is something that I touch on.
One more.
Fuel use, I think it's the one. Yeah, I talk about the fact that there's, the United States uses something like 25% of the world's energy resources, and yet it has only 5% of the population. And ask them to think about that. And interestingly enough, some students have a certain awareness, and they reply back, say, well, yes, but isn't our GNP roughly that? And that sparks a conversation well outside the context of the physics lesson. I've had that, and it's interesting because then somebody else might reply or might put that into question was, wait a minute, what do you need electricity for? A lot of the GNP comes from services, electronics, some come from toxic securities, in fact. You know? But isn't a country that's producing, you know, goods, material goods, need more, you know, things like that. So it's remarkable how it can plug in topics and issues simply because the word is in the air. You know, if you take the time and if you're interested, as Nelly said, sometimes we need to do that just to ward off the boredom, you know, and just kind of take it in another direction. So.
Well, energy is a very large part of the international business class that I teach, and that, you know, that clearly, of course, the presentation on China even more so, but these other three as well are certainly instructive. Some of the other classes maybe not as much, but that class particularly was instructed by this session, this day.
And in professional writing classes, we can use reality-based scenarios and reacting to the past, which is a novel methodology to teach. So we can incorporate these methods in professional writing classes, I think, with benefits.
When's the next one of these conferences? Are they quarterly?
There are about 3 a year.
About 3 a year? Is there one?
Elizabeth already sent out an announcement on the next one.
I must have missed it.
Yeah. And did you have an opportunity to talk with colleagues? I mean, was it primarily folks from the USG who attended
Yeah,
this conference?
USG only.
Only.
Yeah.
Did you find out if anybody else at other system schools is employing any of this information, or where are they in relation to us?
There was one example pointed out that.
University of Pittsburgh has such programs. Most of the presenters, I think, came from University of Pittsburgh, and they have an environmental studies program which has intersections between humanities, social sciences, and sciences. I also believe that there were probably a couple of people from some other university systems that were present, but I cannot be sure of that. Most of the people, I think, came from the university system of Georgia.
But I guess my question is, did you have an opportunity to talk with your colleagues from other university system, Georgia schools?
To some degree, not extensively.
Yeah, but, I mean, I guess we're all trying to learn how to do stuff like that, how to incorporate global issues into our classes, and that's why I guess most of us attended. Everybody had different experiences here, there was one professor, remember, from Australia, but I think he's teaching now here. He said how in Australia, in their high school or school, they were producing their own fruits and vegetables, and they became completely self-sufficient, something like that, and some issues were rising with the local production, but of course, it was only for the school. Just the idea that they can do that, I think it was great, and the students be involved. But we didn't hear about too many cases of work done. I think most of the people were there to learn what they can do.
Yeah, there weren't too many discussions amongst the audience.
Yeah.
I think there were just a couple such opportunities that had people talking amongst themselves.
Yeah.
But for the most part, everybody was glued to the presentations.
So we could not really tell.
I'm not going to have an exercise using power wheels in my class, but, in business classes, we do use a lot of cases. And I actually write some smaller cases, and I think anytime you can ask a student to sort of put themselves in the manager's position and make decisions. So I guess some of the facts and figures and, studying this paper a little more in depth, and also the presentation on the geology and the some of the technology and the energy usage sort of informed my lectures. I've got a lot of facts and figures I can use in my lectures, more than techniques. I wouldn't say that I would actually use some of these. These are interesting techniques, but I think the case method probably, the traditional case method probably works better for my classes. But a lot of information, a lot of good information I picked up that day.
So, is there anybody here who's on the QEP committee?
I apologize, but I have to go ahead at 12:30, so.
Thank y'all.